edition of the Omnist Hour. Today lovely music in the background was Strauss's Alpine Symphony, one of my favorite pieces. I think one that does a pretty good job of epitomizing the march it's been, the long, hard climb that it's been to get to where we're at in the story of creation, which was not perfect after 6 days by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, today's topic, we're going to kind of continue in the same vein as we've been talking about, but hopefully tying a lot of loose threads together to help you understand, kind of just basically who are the good guys and who are the bad guys a little bit better. Because there's going to be a lot of disclosure coming out that is probably going to have you more confused than ever about who you can trust, who you can believe, etc., etc. We're seeing it every day get worse, aren't we? Okay, so we're going to call this one The Basic Rules of Spiritual Star Trek, Identifying Real Adversaries. Okay, so as I've told you before, this event that we're going through is the end of one day of creation, day of testing, not resting, and moving into the next day, which is a day of implementation. Now, any of you who've been involved in a large commercial product, IT or electronics, I've been involved in both, knows that once you've designed and tested everything in the lab, in kind of your little special area that only your company knows about, you got to start moving it out to a larger target base. And it's a battle doing that, because if you move it out too fast, you end up getting a bunch of bugs, a bunch of customer dissatisfaction that hurts your brand and causes sales to slump and may even cause a business to collapse. If you're too slow in introducing a product, your competitor might get out there ahead of you with a product that is good enough and capture the market and leave you grasping for the few people that aren't satisfied with the competitor's product. And this is how creation works too. This is how everything works, in fact. It's all a matter of the phases of marketing a product. This is what incarnation is. This is what a soul does. Once it's born, it's marketing to the multiverse its product, which starts out as a copy of an existing product. That's how any new business wants to model themselves. They find something that already works, steal all the code, all the IP, and then add their unique bit on top. And it's, companies that are really successful in introducing new products stay very focused on the things that they're going to innovate on and try to spend the least resources on the stuff that, this part of my product is just going to be a Me Too creation. And that's how souls work. They start as a Me Too copy of another soul. That's what an NPC is, non-player character in the game of souls. All souls start at that level. That's the lowest level of consciousness. And as groups of souls, we do the same game. The patterns match at all levels of creation. That's another proof that what I'm telling you is true. Basically, we know that the organization we see in all of nature is based upon patterns. Where do those patterns come from, and why do they repeat at every level of organization? Because they're useful patterns. They've been tested for a long time and they're proven to work. Okay? Once you prove something works, you don't have to go reinvent it unless you're really stupid. And many NPCs are really stupid. They keep trying to reinvent wheels that didn't work. Square wheels or pyramids that don't have a top or whatever. I don't know. There's all sorts of stupid things you could get involved in, and I have a lot of fun poking fun at folks doing this sort of numby-gumby missioning of their life or their career or whatever. It's kind of low consciousness, if you ask me. Okay, so where am I getting at here? We were talking in the last couple episodes about some of the ancient history narratives that are real popular right now around, there was the mainstream narrative of history that said civilization started about 6,000 years ago in a few places. That's been blown out of the water, and now there's new theories about civilization starting earlier. And pretty much everyone has admitted that the structures that they found at places like Göbekli Tepe, Sacsayhuaman in South America, the new discoveries that are being found elsewhere. There's one really close to me, a site called Gunung Padang, which seems to be maybe the oldest pyramid complex in human history. So old, in fact, that nobody thought there was anything but a hill there, pyramid-shaped hill, which, a lot of volcanoes look sort of like a pyramid, so it was never investigated. But it turns out that it is man-made, has many layers, and could be, in fact, much older than the oldest structures that have been found anywhere else in the world. And from my point of view, I can verify that because Indonesia, or this area of Indonesia that's still above water, is what's left of the center of the Lemurian Age civilization, which is the oldest civilization on Earth. It goes back actually long before the intelligent versions of humanity were created. That doesn't mean that there weren't intelligent hominids, they just weren't human. They weren't developed on this planet. They were developed actually on the other planet that was destroyed. Where the asteroid belt is now. Okay, so we're going to tie together some of those narratives, and to do this we've got to go back and review and maybe go a little more deep into what's up with the signs of the zodiac. Okay, we're going to focus on the Western zodiac system today. I might have to pull up the Eastern system to illustrate a point, but basically I will mention, for those of you who didn't catch the other podcast that's on a related subject, we know we have two astrological systems. We have the so-called Chinese system, which is not really Chinese, by the way. Like many things, it's one of those things that the Chinese claimed credit for after conquering another people and stealing their ideas, which the Chinese have been really good at for a long, long time. That's basically the nature of the Central Asian beast. They sit on their steps, biding their time until a civilization looks weak, then they go in and conquer it, claim credit for all of the things that it developed, and rebrand it as this is the new China, this is the new Russia, this is the new India, etc., the big continental powers, when pretty much all of it originated other places. Europe, Northern Europe, Oceania, Australia, Indonesia, the Philippines. There was actually a lot more innovation on the fringes of a culture than within the culture itself. That's kind of the nature of the beast. The more ossified a culture becomes, the less innovation there is. And so with power comes, and size comes a tendency to become a dinosaur. That applies at all layers of organization of souls. Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's a statement that pretty much covers why the dinosaurs died out, why previous human civilizations died out, and why chosen people rise and die and everything. This is a pattern that permeates the whole thing. Okay, so where am I going with this? Now, we talked the last time, we emphasized how there was an age of therianthrope species. That age of therianthrope species and its tie to the Great Pyramids goes back further than one cycle of the precession of the equinoxes, one cycle through the constellations. Now, I have here shown basically the dates and names of the last 12 cycles. And I don't go back further than that. You would have to go back further than that, many cycles before, to actually talk about the whole history of humanity. This age of Libra that I start with here was basically long after the time that the pyramids were built, the time of the therianthrope species, the time I mentioned last time, where basically Egypt was like the starport of the earth, with the best connected wormholes, if you wish, or maybe the only ones that were still functional, as the process of creative evolution continued. Now, how that system all got set up was part of the design and implementation of this new planet that was formed as a result of the event that destroyed the previous Gaia. I call it Gaia 11. The scientists call it Theia, the planet that used to be where the asteroid belt is now, and the material of which became a large part of what formed our planet Earth and its moon, and all the very strange and special relationships that they have toward each other and toward patterns like the precession of the equinoxes, which is where we get astrology, the 12 signs of the zodiac. Okay, now that was all set up for a purpose, and the reason it was set up that way is that there was already a galactic federation, if you will, a galactic organization that had been built up, that was basically the more free galactic species, starfaring species, who had teamed up to fight off the adversary species. And if you remember, I told you that God created the original adversary, the original hive mind, Borg, to be the source of non-player characters in this game. So it's almost like controlled opposition. And Borg never generates an entity that hasn't been defeated before in the game of Souls. So by definition, the NPCs generated by Borg can be defeated. They are not all-powerful, all-knowing, etc., etc. The Akashic Records is not all knowledge. It's all knowledge that's been done before, and either didn't work or didn't fully solve a problem and got recycled. Okay, so the people that are telling you, "Ooh, I've been enlightened, I've seen everything, I've seen the whole universe, I know everything." No, sorry, that's not what's going on, folks. And people that tell you that's what's going on are either useful idiots or they are pandering to your narcissistic fantasies of power, or their own narcissistic fantasies of power, of thinking, "I found the one true religion." Okay, but what was really going on and what's really happening with the constellations is that at the time that the Earth was being formed, there were 12 primary species that were galactic and were more or less playing on God's team at the time. That was a different version of God. Okay, it was maybe what you'd call God 11 to go with Gaia 11. Not a perfect version of God, still very fallible, because what hadn't happened up to that point was God had not experienced reincarnation and karma personally. He was still, like with the old God sitting up there, "Well, I don't have to take what those guys are taking. I don't need any pills. I'm perfect already." How many people have you run across that think that way? They think, "Well, I'm already arrived. I'm already perfect. I don't need your medicine, or I don't need anything but the medicine that I think is perfect." And there are all sorts of people that swear by quack cures that are going to keep them alive forever and make them super smart, super intelligent, super successful, and these people are crazy. Yes, they are. They're the crazy ones, not the ones that we're putting in mental asylums. Every one of these bastards that is uber powerful in this world is insane. They couldn't get there if they weren't. And you know that. If you've been watching what's been going on in the last several decades, you know that to the depth of your soul. These aren't the best human beings on the planet. They're just the ones that grab the most. They're the most greedy, selfish children. Self-centered children. Okay, so where am I going with this? These 12 signs represent 12 species, and that's why they map to different animals or concepts. In the Chinese system of astrology, it was very animal-centric, and that's because that's an older system from the Lemurian age that had a better understanding of the tie between these galactic species and the pattern of the patterns of creation. Now, the other odd thing is that the Chinese system, basically you don't get your sign from the month you were born, you get it from the year you were born. And then there's a system beyond the 12 that adds 4 more dimensions. So 4 times 12 is 48. There's actually 48 different signs in the Chinese system. I think we're going to have to pull that up. Let me just cut here and find that. I don't think I've got that handy, so I'm going to just find Chinese astrology on the internet. Bear with me. I've decided that I probably have a sinus infection again. I was thinking it was just another version of COVID, but I don't think I ever got better from the last sickness I had. It just kind of comes and goes. Because what happens is, if you get a secondary sinus infection, you have congestion still going and a lot of mucus flow, but then the bacteria grows on the mucus, and so it's not actually your immune system is not able to get at it to fight it. So if you drain the mucus, then it reinvades your system. So even though you can fight it off very quickly, you never get real sick, you never get real better either. And that's the problem with sinus infections that I don't think most doctors want to tell anybody about, because it makes them a ton of money, and the pharma companies too. Because a person with a chronic sinus infection can be sick for literally, there have been whole years of my life where I basically had a low-grade sinus infection that would never go away, and it would never really be bad enough to have more than a bit of a persistent cough and drainage and headaches and stuff, nothing you can't handle with over-the-counter medication, but it just never gets better. The solution for that, I discovered, was a program of an antibiotic to kill the bacteria or whatever causes it, and sinus drainage medicine that keeps the mucus from building up, so that the medicine can actually get to the bacteria and kill it not leave some of it riding around in your mucus gunk to reinfect your system. Anyway, we're ready to do this next. Nope, not quite. That's not quite what I was looking for. That's got the animals, but it doesn't have the other piece of it. Let's see. Is there one of these that shows? This other piece of the Chinese system of astrology is not so much emphasized anymore, because it doesn't pander to easy interpretation, like look up, ooh, I'm a dragon, that means this, kind of numby-gumby nonsense that people who are into astrology are prone to. Let's see if any of these drawings do justice to that other piece of the puzzle. Maybe this one does. Let's see. Anybody else noticed how much slower and unreliable the internet is these days? Oh, okay, so this shows it. It just doesn't tell you what it is. So the other dimension is fire, wood, air. I'm not sure what this is. I wish that, okay, fire, earth, metal, water, and wood. And so, okay, there's 5 rather than 4. So that's 60, not 48, 60 different signs in the older, quote, Chinese zodiac, which is not really Chinese. It is actually Indonesian or Lemurian. This pre-existing civilization that existed long before China was anything, was ever a nation, long before the Han people ever decided to steal technology and steal history from other people and call it their own, which they're still doing to this day. Okay, so you basically, in the older system, got 60 symbols that then combine the basic, you can see the basic ones are animal things, and then these other ones are elemental things. And that's what proves that this is an older system than the Western system of astrology, but captured different truths. So by studying the Chinese system of astrology, you can learn a lot more about the elemental aspects of creation and the actual species behind those 12 species that were the guardians of the divine plan, if you will. When the old Gaia was destroyed and the new Gaia was being built. Basically, each one of these species would be the chief, like the prime minister or the head of the council of the Galactic Council for that period of time, roughly about 30, I think it's 3,200 years or something like that. In we can see it here. So let's see, 1,300 to 15. So that's 3,150 years is the amount of time it spends. The precession or the ecliptic spends within one sign, and it precesses through all the signs. So 12 times this 3,150 years is a full cycle, and then the same species gets to be kind of the leader. That's how it was set up originally, and how basically the new Earth was put together. It was more of a committee kind of effort. It wasn't perfect, had a lot of missteps and so forth, but it was a balance of power that was felt would achieve what hadn't been achieved with the old chosen planets, because like I said, all the planets of this chosen system have been the focus of very important experiments in creation that go all the way back to the elemental species, and then the age of DNA-based species that followed that. Okay. Now, there are many important star systems that are not part of the zodiac, and those that are outside the zodiac are often the ones where the hive minds, the species or the subspecies that chose to play and organize, like the adversary, like Borg, where they set up shop and basically tried to gum up the works of these other species that kind of were founded on principles of free thought, free will, free speech, and division of power, and openness of what they were doing to scrutiny and review, which is, if you think about it, pretty close to what the founding fathers of the United States had in mind with the U.S. Constitution, a more godly government. They had previous models to work from, previous ideas to work from. That's where these ideas came from. Many of those ideas were preserved by secret societies. But as I've told you in other episodes, those secret societies, by trying to keep their secrets, trying to preserve their secrets, became vulnerable to infiltration. Like many of the secret societies of the West, the Skull and Bones Club, which originally was basically a higher level Masonic group of actually pretty good guys within the American power system, which wasn't perfect, but who had an idea of, well, we're gonna work behind the scenes to make things better, because we know that we've got corruption, we've got problems in our system. That was basically how all of these secret societies, the Templars, the Masons, etc., 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 started. They were actually trying to make things better because the power systems that they lived within had become corrupted, whether it's the Catholic Church or the Egyptian dynasties or the previous god, alien species that happen to be overlording it over this earth as it was being set up for the time we're in now. Okay, so who are these 12 species? I think I'm actually going to go back to that. Okay, so I think the Eastern mapping is actually going to give us a closer look. The rat. Imagine a humanoid species that was half rat. What they would look like, how they would act, what their characteristics would be. That was one of those species. And that was their physical manifestation too. And you find traces of that in the human genome. There are people that look like rats. And it's not just because they were born in the year of the rat. It's something built into their genes. We have elements of all these species left in us, even though we don't have very strong remnants of it. Ox is one of the ones that is more or less in common with Taurus. The idea of taurid therianthrope, half bull, half person or other species. There were other mixtures too, not just a combination of two. Tiger, okay, that's more or less in the same vein as Leo. Rabbit, okay, we know the pluses and minuses of rabbits and what they might be useful, what a half humanoid rabbit and half rabbit would be well suited to. They multiply quickly. Once you got a planet terraformed, a species like that would multiply like rabbits. And humanity on its better days can multiply fairly quickly. Not as quickly as rabbits though, huh? The dragon is a very important one. The dragon is the draconians, the reptilians. That's where those cats come from. They were one of these original species that were stewards of this experiment. Not bad guys. Although they had their evil people as well, and do to this day. A snake. It's interesting that dragon and snake are separated in the Eastern system. They're actually similar origin. Snakes are reptilians too, but the snake is the Naga-like reptilian of that are revered in India as being inspiring and helpful and encouraging people to think about both sides of something before just jumping into anything. Dragons are fiery and impetuous and will fight anybody to defend their terrain. The image of a dragon is very different than the image of a snake, but they have some similarities, don't they? The horse is differentiated from the ox, which it's not so much in the Western zodiac, although Sagittarius and Taurus aren't considered to be the same. They are related signs. We'll talk about that later. Monkey, okay, so this is the humanoid or the simian part of us. And yes, we are more hominoid than many other species. We don't even look like we have these other pieces of DNA in us, but they are there. Maybe not active, they're junk DNA that's there to be reactivated if we need to adapt to different planetary environments, different challenges. That's what the breeding of new soul vehicles is all about, has always been about. That's why DNA was created. It didn't evolve, it didn't happen by chance. DNA was designed as a prototyping tool, rapid prototyping tool for generating new soul vehicles. As the game of souls became more evolved and individual soul vehicles that were of most interest were not, I want to be the soul of a star. I want to be the soul of a planet. Okay, there was a time where that was the big thrill of the game, but as it evolved, more fun was had by being the leader, the hive mind queen of one of these other species. Rooster, that's the also reptilian origin species, but now it's broken off as a separate one as birds. And birds kind of had their own story that was carried as part of the reptilian genome. And this is the key to understanding reptilian DNA. Reptilian DNA was developed because it is very, very adaptable. They're a great species for terraforming because they can quickly adapt to living on land, living in the water, or even spending most of their time in the air. And all three of those have allowed this reptilian genome to survive and flourish on this planet. Just not much of it that is high intelligence, because reptilians who become too intelligent tend to be some of the worst tyrants. Their adaptability gives them sort of an air of superiority. And we know what that does. That makes them feel more powerful, more entitled, and they become narcissistic and turn to evil. And that's kind of the challenge of being a reptilian. They aren't all bad. There are some very noble reptilians. And we all have reptilian genes in our DNA. Some have it more actively, some more passively. The dog, that's another interesting one, as a kind of a counterpoise to the tiger. The truth about cats and dogs is another subject that I talk about. The tiger and the dog people are basically the two species of this bunch of 12 whose conflicts led to the creation of sex. When this system was set up, all of these species were basically autosexual. They could reproduce with any member of the same species, or even members of other species, if they had the right DNA technology. And that's what made the reptilians popular, because the reptilians were the best at that, other than the ones that created the reptilians, and who were the ones that designed DNA, that created DNA. Each of these species has their own specialty, their own strong point, and that's why there was this rotation between them, because it was figured that, well, we can't let one species, even the oldest one, rule all the others, because that didn't work before. That didn't work in the time of a pyramid system where the closer you were to God, the older a species was, the closer your soul was to the Creator, gave you more power. That's basically what the pyramid system was all about. That's why pyramid power doesn't work anymore. It's never going to work again. You're never going to be able to go to the Great Pyramid and get it to function as a Stargate. I'm sorry. You can put the right equipment in there if you know what to reinstall that was taken out of it. But you can chant and moan and do whatever you want outside the pyramid or inside, and you're not going to get it to function as a Stargate unless you're a god, and then you don't need the pyramid. You might use the pyramid to make a show for the little people, but it's not. That's not how it works. Okay, so these 12 species, and they were kind of on top of an earlier system that basically understood the earlier group of non-DNA species that were elementals: wood, water, fire, earth, and metal. Okay, now these are important to mention because as the system has evolved, as we've gone through the Lemurian age, which was started by basically reptilian explorers rediscovering the Earth after it had gone through some major great resets, and thinking, oh, this would be a great place to set up a reptilian base. And look at all these wonderful semi-intelligent humanoids that we can tweak a little bit and turn into our worshiping slaves. And this is a story that's captured in the best translated version of the Enuma Elish. That's why many students of ancient history, modern students, will talk about, well, humanity was created as a slave planet, because their understanding of what's going on here only goes back to the start of our species. And we did begin as basically jumped up monkeys with our DNA enhanced, augmented, to give us more ability to work autonomously, but less ability to resist programming, and very subject to mind control. Okay, so this original system that was set up didn't last all that long. These 12 species started fighting and trying to stop the next one from basically taking over control of the experiment like they were supposed to. And, you know, that first galactic federation eventually crumbled and fell apart, and some of the species were wiped out. Some all at once, pretty quickly, some gradually. And this is, as I talked about last time, how the Therianthrope species eventually died out. And we were left with dumbed down versions of those species that used to be kind of the stewards of the Gaia experiment. Our dogs and our cats are what's left of the species that were the Leonids. And in this, you don't see it in this new thing. You don't see a dog here, do you? There's no dog in the Western astrology. We have the dog star, though, Sirius. And that actually tells the truth, that the dog star was where a hive mind dog species was, that basically was used by the Borg to gum up this system of the first galactic federation. And the dog species from Sirius and the cat species, the Leonids, were the ones that whose fight got so extreme that basically all of the other species got together and said, we gotta fix this problem with cats and dogs. And that's when one of the hive mind species said, oh, I have a solution. Let's just make a rule that the cats have to breed with dogs or else they can't reproduce. And that's how sex was created. The cats used to be unisex, but they had their particular nature as an alpha predator, very independent alpha predator, and the dog nature was a pack alpha predator. The power of dogs comes from their strange ability to communicate telepathically with their leader. So it's not an obvious hive mind anymore, but if you watch the behavior of dogs, or at least hunting dogs, or the ones that are closest to their wolf ancestors, you will see that they behave much more in a hive-minded way than cats. Now, both of those intelligent species have been all but wiped out. Now, I don't know, maybe there's some zoo specimens that some other species have kept or have the DNA of that they can resurrect sometime. That's maybe a good intro into where we're at here. Let's talk about all these species as we know them now. And again, these are not the original 12. These are the ones as they were known in this last age where human culture named them. And if you know anything about the older phases of human history that aren't recorded, like for instance in Göbekli Tepe, one of the constellations that is very prominently featured in the astrological representations in Göbekli Tepe and other cultures of the time is a vulture, which they think may be equated with Cygnus. But Cygnus is not part of the zodiac, is it? These constellations change. The idea that's been constant is the idea of 12 and the precession of the equinoxes. And we've assigned different identities and roles to these as the nature of the game has changed. So if we go through the last cycle, I'm going to try to tell you what the original connection was and what it means now. Libra. If you know what Libra comes from, it's supposed to be, liberate. That's where that word comes from. Libra is shown holding scales. It's supposed to be some goddess of justice or equity. Libra is also the source of the word library. And that's where you can get at who this species really was and still is. Libra, the librarians of the Gaia experiment, are the plants. The plants are a group of species, some of which are more hive-minded, some less hive-minded, but they all function pretty much independently. In other words, you don't see plants that are under, if you kill, there's no master plant of any species that you can kill and suddenly the others go wandering around like stupid zombies, right? So they have a hive mind, but it is kind of a democratic hive mind, if you will. They have a shared consciousness, but they don't have a special leader. They choose leaders, I guess. There are some plants that are older than others, and those are the ones that tend to be the most respected. The plants that have lived the longest are trees, and so the trees tended to be the most intelligent, high status plant soul vehicles. But in times of stress, the smallest and most mobile and most adaptable of the librarians are the ones that survive. And so, lichens, moss, spores are what's used to retain memories of a planet that dies off and goes into hibernation until it's ready to sprout again. This is where life emerges after a great reset, if you will. And if you've done that many times, the plant DNA has as complex a structure as human DNA. And you find that there's junk DNA in plant DNA that contains the code for plants to adapt to other forms very quickly to fill evolutionary niches created by catastrophic events. At any rate, the librarian species, some of them actually focus on that librarian function. And those are the ones that are the psychotropic plants, the psychedelic plants that humans can take and ingest and have these altered state experiences. Because those will connect you with either experiences, memories of the plants who have been connected to the board, who have access to the so-called Akashic records, or they can connect you as sort of an exchange network to independent souls that live a spiritual existence that have an interface with the plants. And so this is the connection that you get between plants, psychedelic plants, and actually connecting you with, higher power, higher order spiritual entities. And they don't connect everybody with God. This is nonsense. Anybody who says, oh, everybody has to do psychedelic because then they will be connected with everything and they will know God. I'm sorry. You're on the low end of the consciousness spectrum if that's what you got out of psychedelic trip. And that's why so many of these people actually get hooked on psychedelics, because they kind of sense that they haven't gotten the whole picture, or they could get a little bit more if they just do another trip, and they get hooked on it. You've got people that are hooked on marijuana, you've got people that are hooked on mushrooms, you've got people that are even hooked on ayahuasca. Even one of the people I admire most, Graham Hancock, is kind of an ayahuasca addict. I think he and other people like him, of his way of thinking, his worldview, do ayahuasca as if it's some sort of magic healing thing. And that's the way a lot of people are treating DMT now, as, oh, well, it's a magic cure for depression. It'll work for everybody. We need to get the pharma industry to package it and market it and train everybody how to administer it, and then it's going to be a cure-all for all depression. This is nonsense. Absolute nonsense. These plants connect you with altered state experiences that show you other places in the multiverse, other experiences that they have recorded, which include other human experiences, other experiences of species that we don't even have anymore around, that have died out, but could come back, or maybe from the future. The DMT entities that people talk about most are the ones that occur most in average NPC souls, very young, newborn, low consciousness souls that experience a psychedelic trip. And even advanced souls may be only experiencing that because they're not attuned, they're not awakened enough spiritually to get anything more out of that experience. And just because, 90% of blah, blah, blah experience time with the machine elves, that doesn't make that a core truth. It just makes it that, okay, this is where you're likely, you can see psychedelic plants as like switchboard operators. And, if they get a call from somebody that's pretty important, that seems to have a pretty interesting mission, they'll connect them with more care, more thought, than they will just the average person who thought, well, I've been a little depressed lately. I think I better go do some DMT. Okay? I know this is not going to be popular with a lot of people. I'm sorry, if you want to tell the truth, you're going to have to piss off a lot of your audience, which means you'll probably never be a popular YouTube content creator. Because to get popular, you gotta be nice, and you gotta be loved and liked and shared and subscribed, and you can't hurt anybody's feelings. I'm sorry. That's giving into the adversary right there. You know, that's kowtowing to tyranny. And I don't do that. I'll never do that, and I don't recommend that you do, because that is going to get you strikes, karmic strikes, that are going to prevent you from achieving your own personal godhood. Okay, so we talked about Libra being the plant species that was like the alpha plant of the galactic federation in its original conception. Virgo, that's an interesting one, very interesting one. Virgo the Virgin is associated with the Virgin Huntress and other virgin goddesses who miraculously could reproduce without having sex. And so that's a clue. The age of Virgo was an age of the hive mind species that is led by the descendants of Lilith. Lilith, if you know human history, was this archdemon who could shapeshift, manifest in any shape or form, and who would mess with people's minds, and had a particular interest in reproduction, human reproduction, either corrupting men to make them infertile and having their mind, or have their minds basically filled with visions of beautiful succubi that would make their wives unattractive to them, and make it preferable to have masturbation fantasies to actually producing children. This Lilith entity, which you hear a lot of in Sumerian tradition, but has reduced in the Bible to being the first wife of Adam, and even in some of the Kabbalistic works and books excised from the Bible, has a very small mention still. At any rate, she was also known to basically mess with the wombs of women so they couldn't have children, or destroy children in the womb. A very, very dark goddess, which is why some would prefer to call her an archdemon. And that's the real adversary. This species is, of all the chosen species, the one that thinks, we were perfect, why did you screw anything up by making sex? And they think all the sexual chosen species that came after are inferior to them. Now, not all of these are bad guys, but they kind of have this very elitist mindset, and the worst of them have been the ones that, for instance, Virgo is the species that was Virgo created Tiamat. Yep, Virgo is the dragon species, the shape-shifting, airy, elemental, fantasy creatures that don't like the Gaia experiment. They originated on this old Gaia, but they didn't like what God was doing there, and went off and made their own hive mind colonies out in space, and made it their life's mission to destroy this chosen system. Well, that actually maps the closest to what Borg does. These are NPCs. They're not the smartest tools in the shed. This represents, in essence, the darkest side of female nature. The non-nurturing, selfish side of female nature.
Don't touch me unless I want to be touched. And then only touch me the way I want to be touched. Because I am woman.
You see any of that there going on today? Now, this age that they presided over was actually the age about 12,800 years ago was when the worst of the Upper Dryas event happened. And there was another great reset that nearly destroyed all of humanity. In fact, did destroy all the large mammal species on the planet, with very few exceptions. The mastodons disappeared, the saber-toothed tigers, the dire wolves, the giant sloths, and in fact also finished wiping out giant humanoids. And many of the therianthropes that were still active on this planet. Now, as I told you, these therianthropes had their own systems because they were in this first galactic era before the first Gaia, Gaia 11 was destroyed, and they were chosen to be stewards of it after it was destroyed, to rebuild this new planet. And at that time, it was known that, okay, we're building a new Gaia to replace the one that was destroyed, and we're going to do this experiment better. It wasn't known at the time that to do it better would require a lot to be forgotten. At least it wasn't broadly known. And at that time, the Galactic Federation was set up to be very open and honest and sharing of information, and all of these things that we inherently think are pretty good, but make us vulnerable to adversaries who like to use the openness and honesty of a system against it by spreading disinformation to people that don't know how to combat it, how to deal with somebody that won't play by the rules. And that's another theme of all creation. The ones who want power and will do anything to get it don't give a damn about the rules. They don't care what the law is. They will use the law, they will weaponize the law to use it against you. And that's happening again right now. That's what the enemies of humanity are doing. And feeding that narrative to people who think, oh, we're the oppressed ones and we need to get power so we can have power for the people, and everybody can be equal, and we can all get called by our correct pronouns. Therefore, we're gonna break all the rules, and we're gonna break into the shops, and we're gonna tear it down, tear everything down so we can build it back better. Sound like a familiar narrative? This is an old pattern. It's been done before. These people are useful idiots who don't get that they're being used. They're being used to destroy their own species, like it's been nearly destroyed so many times before. Well, if you look back in history, all of those destructions have been less and less complete. The Great Resets become less and less great. As we talked about in the last one, the Permian extinction was a huge extinction that wiped out almost all species except for a very small class of marine species that could survive for a long time in very polluted, very toxic waters. Now, that doesn't mean there weren't any survivors of other species. It's just that that's all we see in the fossil record. And this is another thing that people don't understand about paleontology and archaeology and geology is that looking back into our world's past, we would like to think that what we find is a representative sample of all that was there. That's nonsense. It's a representative sample of what was most likely to be preserved. Okay? So what's the most likely thing to be preserved of plant species? Fossilized trees. The soft plants don't survive very well unless it's in a certain kind of burial. Sometimes they survive very well in anaerobic environments. Invertebrate species, there's some places they're very survivable, other places they'll never be seen. This biases our science among scientists that haven't stopped to think about where their data sources are coming from and what they might be missing by only seeing what's still available from thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years ago. And this is what has caused them to ignore the few finds that they have that don't fit their standard models. They have found aluminum pieces that could not possibly have been natural in rocks that are millions of years old. The only way to explain that is there were technological civilizations back then, or time travel works. Maybe both. Do you have a problem with accepting that possibility? Just because your mind is so blinkered by postmodernist thinking, by the accepted narrative that will get your paper approved for publication in a journal? These are not the sharpest people in the shed of humanity. The ones who are just going to play the game, however it's supposed to be played, so I can get tenure, so I can get published more, so I can get a bigger raise, so I can get more grants and endowments, so I can maybe make the shift into government and really start raking in the cash. These are not your role models in this species. These are NPC souls that have no concept of what they're doing to themselves till they hit the afterlife and they have their life review and see what assholes they've been. Selfish assholes who cause a lot of problems. And there's going to be a lot of them that are going to find out that, oh, well, I don't care if you're Christian, you were an asshole Christian. You're going to a Christian hell. Or some other kind of hell. I don't care how many times a day you bowed down to Allah and went through your routine. If you're one of the Ayatollahs, if you're one of the arch Sharia enforcers abusing women in the name of Allah, I'm sorry. You're not going to heaven. You're not going to get your 72 virgins in heaven for being a jihadist. That's nonsense. That is so stupid. It's laughable, and yet you've got these numby-gumby, useful idiots being programmed to think that stuff. And we gotta stop doing that. We've gotta stop pandering to the stupidest, most programmable souls on the planet. They're furniture. They're not here to learn unless they try to learn. And every soul has the opportunity to learn, but you can't force them. It's like that old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Okay? You can't force people to become awakened. You can't force them to become enlightened. If you try to do it, all you're going to succeed in doing is programming them with a new operating system. And programmable operating systems are how you turn people into organic AI. That's why people are so afraid of AI, because deep down, they know that in some dimensions, they are AI. That's why they're afraid of losing their jobs. Because what they do isn't valuable enough that any program couldn't do it just as easily. Any robot couldn't do it just as easily. Now, that's a reasonable fear to have. And if you don't have a sense of the soul being immortal and evolving, you might get very dark thoughts from that fear and do some very dark things. And that's what you got going on right now. You got a bunch of folks that think they are woke, that they're enlightened, that they found salvation through Jesus, and all they need to do is go push it on everybody else, and everything will be perfect. These are NPC souls. These are programmable AIs. They are dumb as dirt when you get past all their highfalutin talk. And yeah, they show up in academic circles and they act like they're really smart. If you've ever sat through one of these debates between an arch Christian and an arch atheist or whatever, you know, they all sound very intelligent. They make intelligent arguments, but they're both basing their arguments on absurd fantasies, fallacies. Okay? Provably absurd fantasies and fallacies that they never talk about, because both of them are using basically a different version of the same fallacy. The science worshippers worship the laws of the multiverse that exhibit themselves in this localized part of one physical universe. That's the scientist's assumption, is that if I run this experiment and get a result, then that result will happen every time. Oops. What happens when that kind of thinking meets quantum theory? Doesn't work. Turns out experimentation is a probabilistic thing. Quantum phenomena are probabilistic. And the probabilities change depending on how you set up and run the experiment. This is stuff that we know, folks. Ask any honest physicist that really knows their stuff. It's not that simple as you would like it to be, as either fundamentalist religionists or fundamentalist scientism worshippers would like it to be. And yet those are the only voices we're given to listen to and choose from in this stupid debate that we have, these stupid duality arguments between one bunch of lies and another one bunch of lies. God, it's stupid. Okay, let's keep going. So the age of Leo, the age of Virgo, was then a very destructive one. That's when the last really big Great Reset happened, that was so big that basically scientists, when they started looking at data, like digging up cities and stuff, they concluded, well, humanity at this point must have been just hunter-gatherers, because all we find is these low technology sites that you know, have no evidence of cultivation or blah, 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 blah. Okay, these guys are stupid. They don't understand, and they don't want to understand, that these different kinds of great resets wipe out different types of civilization. And one thing we know about civilization is that in times of plenty, civilization tends to flourish most near the sea, because the sea is the most flexible way to transport stuff. That's why most of globalist economy is done by these big container ships. That's the cheapest way to get stuff around the world in large volume at low cost. Transportation over land, you have fewer options. You have trains, you have trucks, you have pack animals, etc. Those can't carry as much stuff, and it takes longer to get there. Even with high-speed trains, it doesn't go, well, maybe high-speed trains go faster than container ships. So speed might be a factor. But again, speed isn't the only thing. It's cost and time to deliver that determine how good a distribution system is. That and how reliable it is. And that's where we get into the question of these great resets. Okay? The sure thing great resets that are going to happen are the things that happen on solar cycle repeating pattern, or a precession cycle repeating pattern. Okay, the cycle of this precession is a function. It's really hard to explain this to a layman, but I'll try to. Okay, so if you have objects rotating around each other in a complex system, okay, it's fairly easy to describe the behavior of two objects of certain mass at a certain distance, how they are going to move around each other. And that's always how it happens. They move around a common center. Now, when one of the objects is very, very massive, like the sun, and the other is not so massive, like the Earth, it seems like the Earth is doing all the moving and the sun is standing still. But that's not exactly how it happens. And in fact, the most massive planet, Jupiter, is so big that its pattern of rotation with the sun has a center that is outside the sun. Not the center of the sun. And these perturbations of these objects that are so close and other objects which are further, which, if you know that gravity decreases in a 1/r way, these further objects would have to be very, very massive to have a big effect. But entire galaxies, star clusters, black holes are very massive, and they can have a perturbative effect on these cyclical patterns. And these cyclical patterns that draw us closer or further from the sun, or stimulate weather on the sun, weather on our planet, within our planet, tectonic weather, if you will, those patterns are subtle, but they can have huge effects if an alignment happens that creates basically a really high tide of perturbation of the objects involved. If you know anything about how tides work, okay, tides happen because there is a pull of gravity much larger on one side of the Earth. And that basically stretches out anything that will move into more of an egg shape. That's why we have tides. And when we move around, the phase of the moon changes, the tides will be higher or lower. There are tidal effects of our movement around the sun. There are tidal effects of the planets. This is the basis of truth within astrology. It's an influence of resonances. This is the truth of resonance. It's not a simple, stupid thing like, oh, that wasn't very high vibe. I'm going to be as high vibe as I can and I'm going to go to heaven. You guys are so friggin' dumb, gullible, narcissistic, and stupid, and I don't mind telling you that. Okay, the age of Leo was the age of this species that was the cat people that carved the Sphinx. Now, this most recent age of Leo was in this age where these species were still trying to be the leader of the earth. This age of Leo was basically one where the Leonid, the Therianthrope species led by the lion people, tried to do rebuilding and repopulating, and were encouraging humanity to come out of their caves. Come out, wherever you are. The witches are gone. They've gone very far. No, they haven't gone that far. So this was an attempt to restart civilization, and there is, you can see that they've said, well, okay, there's now evidence that this is where the earliest urbanization was. This is something they probably changed recently with the discovery at Göbekli Tepe of very advanced civilization structures in an era that before had been, they've been saying, well, it's just a bunch of hunter-gatherers. Maybe they got together, once a year so they could play games and build Stonehenges. You just can't make this shit up. So this age of Leo was an age of restorations. But it only lasted a little over 3,000 years, and then we have this age of Cancer. Now, what species is behind Cancer? That's another one that we've got to go pretty deep on. Cancer is the crab. And that species encompasses the, I forget what they call them, but these hard-shelled species that have a lot of legs. Okay, so it's basically species that are mobile and are programmed for offense-defense activities. This is the species that basically gave us the insects, the spiders, bugs of all types. And I'm talking about bugs in the modern sense of, okay, well, a bug can also be a virus, a cancer, a computer virus, or a computer cancer. This age of Cancer is an age of basically creatures that are very good at attack and defense. That's their specialty. And the age of Cancer started with a rebellion against the Leo, the cat people. Oh, I'm so perfect. Purr, 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 purr. I think we should rule this planet forever and just, keep the humans around as slaves because they made such a mess of things the last time we gave them any free will. Okay, that's kind of, the Leonines are an elitist, very fussy species. They really are like cats. They're very individualistic, very narcissistic. I know I've been one of them. I've told you before about my incarnation as one of the cat people way back when, under purple skies. That wasn't this age of Leo. That was long before this. But, patterns don't change. this is a characteristic of the cat personality. So this was kind of like a virtue signaling cat personality attempt at rebuilding after the big extinction event of the age of Virgo in kind of a beautiful people. Let's keep the pyramids for the people that can really understand pyramid power. And that led to a natural reaction by the Cancer creatures, souls. They're kind of like the eternal underdogs. They always feel like they're under attack, and no matter how much power they have, they never seem to have enough defense. Okay, this age of Cancer was basically the rule of the Scorpion King. This is when the Scorpion King took over the Egyptian world and rebuilt it in their image. And the Scorpion King is also the type of entity that Shiva was in the Hindu world. Kali. That's why they're depicted as having many hands with weapons in them. Okay? These are Cancer species. They're fighters. They're destroyers. They're, they want to free all the slaves. And even if it kills the world in the process, Cancer is a very bad thing. It can kill the patient. And that's essentially what happened during this age. It was another step back, another destructive phase that pretty much undid almost everything in the age of Leo. That's why, if you study up on Göbekli Tepe and other sites that are now being found, better way. And this beginning of civilization was wiped out again, or largely wiped out. Zodiac and not in the Chinese zodiac. The reason is that not these old chosen species of the original Galactic Federation, but basically new ones or ones that hadn't been chosen species before that happen to have gotten chosen. Age of Gemini, the antidote to the age of Cancer. The entities of the age of Cancer were trying to wipe out, basically completely reset the whole planet and turn it into basically a hive mind factory. Mind controlling Cancer entities, the most powerful of which were actually hive mind spiders. Not the Scorpion Kings. The Scorpion Kings were like the military leaders. The Shivas were the military, the high status soldier drones that got to fuck the queen. The queens were the and this is the entity that people like to think of as Mother Nature, because that's essentially how these Cancerians present themselves in kind of a virtue signaling way as, oh, we're the cure, oh, because all of technology way of thinking. It's an anti-progressive way of thinking, even though nowadays Cancerian people are calling themselves progressive. It's so funny. Anyway, the age of Gemini system, but the whole galaxy. What, the hive minds were winning, the hive spiders were winning, and it looked like it was going to be lights out. They were taking one species after another and enslaving them, mind controlling them, dumbing them down. Uh, in fact, you may know that the closest system to ours in light years is Alpha Centauri. Why is it called Alpha Centauri? Alpha, the first letter of the alphabet. Actually, what do the words mean? Cent is Latin for basically base 10. There are 100 cents in a dollar. A century was a group of 100 soldiers that made up one of the divisions of a legion. Five-fingered taurid species. It's not a cent hippus. If it was a horse, it would be cent hippus, not centaur. This is another of the things that the age of Gemini, most recent age of Gemini, was basically the transfer of being the chosen species to humanity from the last non-human Messiah. You know, the Chi-Rho symbol that's supposed to mean Christ? It's not a cross. It's a Chi-Rho. It's two letters. And those two letters, that monogram, was in use long before the era that supposedly Jesus was born. This was the last non-human Messiah. And it's why the chief god of the Hindus is Brahma, the Brahma bull. And that's one of the reasons why you don't see Hindus worshiping Brahma. They dehumanized Brahma because they have a hard time dealing with us to survive through these very, very difficult times. And that's what was going on basically in the age of Gemini. All of these therianthrope species that had been sort of keeping the balance of power in the galaxy were being the main or being wiped out and dumbed down into a slave species, which our animals are all kind of dumbed down from what they used to be. There used to be more ones like cats and dogs and pigs and blah blah blah, even dinosaurs. Okay, so this last of the centaurs was this Chiron fellow who escaped from Alpha Centauri before they were one of the most free-thinking and independent species of the galaxy, and as such were one that they decided that the adversary decided had to be completely wiped out. And that's why we don't have any centaurs anymore. Creatures in Assyria. Those aren't somebody's friggin' imagination. Creatures like that did exist. And they were that big. Because in times of plenty, in times of comfort, giantism is natural for species to do. Bigger is better. Size when the mighty fall. And that's what we're seeing right now with globalism. Companies have become too big to succeed. Countries, governments have become too big to succeed, too powerful. Result of people worshiping power. Power is not the most important characteristic of a system. If you think survival of the fittest means survival of the most powerful, you are a useful idiot who thinks like a social Darwinist. And you are one of the global system seizing up and power mad megalomaniacs all over the world trying to see who gets to be the next godfather or godmother of humanity. It's insane. Absolutely insane. Okay, so the age of Gemini was this transfer of stewardship of the Messiah program from the human Messiah, which in some cultures is known as Gilgamesh, and in other cultures is known as Hercules. There may be other names. Well, I guess Marduk or, there's other incarnations of this idea. That's why Krishna sounds so much like Christ. So this was the pass down of not all knowledge of what was going on, but enough to allow a few heroic leaders, the cancer forces, defeat the hive mind adversaries. And they hunted down, this is the era when they started hunting down basically mind controlling creatures, which included dragons. It included not the Hindu religion tells us they were. The serpent gods were fickle gods, virtue signaling gods, who would be perfectly nice and happy, getting served by their acolytes in the temple until virgin sacrifice. All of these pre-existing religions, these pre-existing gods loved human sacrifice, especially children. This is the tie-in with the truth of adrenochrome. As probably the best source of adrenochrome in the galaxy. And that's one of the things that has made humanity so interesting to other species who may not know anything about what's been going on with the Gaia experiment, but they know that they can and it's what many of them still want to do in their secret enclaves in New York City and elsewhere, where they conduct satanic child sacrificing rituals and indoctrinate people into the darkest form of Satan. Transition phase, the pattern of Gemini is an important one. And it's called twins, but it's not necessarily twins. It's the pattern of two back-to-back messiahs that keep the game going. And it's a pattern that is coming back now. Pattern, because that's how it ended up playing out. That's what the meme of the Dread Pirate Roberts is all about. That's why it's such a popular thing after it was introduced by the Princess Bride. And I think I've explained that in another one of my segments, so you can go to that one and understand it better. You'll understand it too better if you watch Star Trek and see how they defeated the Borg, or one of the hive mind creatures that they dealt with. The more computer-oriented one is they got it to go into an infinite loop. What's a perfect infinite loop? To put an entity that's looking for messiahs so it can of time to look. And so it's just going wild, whacking with as many hands as it has and everything in sight. And that's kind of what Shiva and Kali are all about. That's why they're sometimes depicted with myriad of hands instead of the normal. You notice how a lot of times they're depicted with 4 hands. And talk about digital spirituality, if you will. Okay, so the age of Gemini. The age of Taurus is the age of the Taurids, the half bull or the bull originated creatures. Part of what established the pattern, the signals that had to happen for a real, and this is where real astrology comes in, because I can tell you that. Well, let's talk about Aries before we do that. So Taurus was an age of bull worship, and we're going to make them golden. and became an era of idol worship that kind of spoiled the whole idea of, gosh, the Messiah pattern was the last non-human Messiah, a half bull, passing down the torch to a human one. And maybe we're the ones driving the bus. And that's kind of what was going on in the age of Taurus, the shift over from worshiping non-human things to saying, you know what, if we're going to solve this problem, we better do it in our species. We better have our own Messiah, which led to the age of Aries. And tried to find a way to come up with its own Messiah. This was an age where humanity was also came under the influence of an entity called Pan. The Satanism. Pan is basically the god that tells everybody, well, you can be a god. All you got to do is drink wine and do my festivities and participate in my rituals. It doesn't matter if we're killing children or doing anything. Peace, cosmic oneness. They are pantheists. They worship a lie. They don't want to see evil in what they do. They're willing to ignore it if their leaders are doing evil. And with this young acolyte by sexually molesting them. This all kicked up in the age of Aries. Also the era where monotheism took root. And although monotheism of all creation, but it wasn't an all entity. It was one soul who had the first good ideas that didn't get destroyed by bad ideas. God didn't create everything. God his own private lab, and when that converged on a solution, okay, let's see if we can get to the midpoint of that solution. If we can get to the midpoint by any other way, that God said were the boundary conditions for success of an experiment. This gets into my talking about time and string theory in recent presentations. It's about the midpoint. And each day of creation, major day of creation, and establishes a new midpoint. Each successful incarnation of the capital M Messiah, God, establishes a new midpoint, a new save game that stretches the beginning of time out further and the end of time out further and the end. And the ultimate goal is worlds without beginning or end in time or any other space or any other dimension. That's what creation is all about. That's the ultimate goal. It's not going to be perfect in 6 days. It's not perfect in 7 days. It was a transitional time where the important thing for humanity to be doing was to be creating monotheism, creating spiritual atheism, spiritual communism through Buddhism, and basically God, and try to get away from it all. Age of a lot of confusion. Age of Confucius, actually, which certainly goes with a lot of confusion. The ultimate meritocrat. And nepotistically raising their family and friends to high positions of power that they weren't qualified for. And there's nothing going on with the Chinese Communist Party that isn't part and parcel of the pattern of Chinese government forever. If you look to kingdom is always going to be muddled as long as Confucius and Taoist thinking and Buddhist thinking dominates their mindset. The communists sort of got that. They tried to wipe out religion, blaming it on religion. No, it's about a way of thinking, which is all of till it's too. These dynasties have been about. Everybody's afraid, or they might get censured. They might be talked badly about. This fear see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, and call yourself wise. That is as useful idiot as you could possibly be. That's a person that wants to be dominated by tyranny. That's going to go along with anything as long as they're not the next one that gets whacked. And if you care a lot, that's pretty stupid. Because you will be manipulated and controlled by tyrants. Okay, the age of Pisces, the fish. Now this is another one that is kind of interesting because fish, as we know, are closely related to reptiles. And why reptiles can become amphibious. And the age of Pisces, maybe at one point was an age of fish people, the Ioannis, the mermen, who were one of the species that came out of the ocean after this cataclysmic flood. There are other things under the sea that aren't so friendly. And even among the therianthrope fish species that are still down there, yes they are. Sailors weren't smoking dope or doing anything when they say they saw mer people. And then limited versions of similar DNA, and they all have a part to play in what's going on here. We know that dolphins, whales, they will rescue people. They will save other species from destruction by killer whales or killer sharks. Not all their species are that altruistic. There are variabilities. There's that a baby shark is probably not as good a role model for your children as a baby whale or a baby dolphin. Okay, so the age of Pisces, the fish. The fish symbol is one of the symbols of Christianity, right? Fishermen, which is not really a new idea. It's an idea that keeps coming up. It's a messianic idea. And this version of it happened because a group of fishermen, maybe they were brothers fishing in Galilee, or maybe they were actually fishing I don't know what the true experiences. And during this very interesting time of the transition from Aries to Pisces, many people were getting near-death experience visions that told the Christ that keeps coming back. That's what's the difference between the Christ story and the Krishna story. The Krishna story took these visions and cast it in the framework of a civilization, of a people that believed in reincarnation, that gods and people are reborn. And they said, okay, we need a new incarnation of God, of Brahma, and they made this new god Krishna to encompass the Christ concept. Probably should have called him Brahma Krishna for the one that's coming next, the one that's going to finally fulfill all the prophecies. And this planetary system was formed. Okay, so the age of Pisces saw the rise of Christianity, Islam, and eventually atheism, communism, nihilism, all of the dark religions of postmodernist thinking, scientism. This age of Aquarius, the Aquarian species. So this is the species of, yes, representing the fish. But the fish, as I say, were closely related to the reptilians. They were the species that preceded reptilians in DNA was made the way it was, and it was experimented with first to perfect it and add all the pieces that were needed so that we could rebuild a planet without having to overtly engineer every species and tip our hand about, well, you know, God did all this. We don't need to. another ark, and so we can just go ahead and have fun and party on and not worry about anything. That's how it went down. And yes, evolution does work now. And for the most part, nobody needs to step in and do anything to recover from a disaster. For our planet, guaranteed. Folks like Randall Carlson have already figured out pieces of the magic sauce. They don't know exactly when, but they know the general periodicity of when these events are most likely to occur again. And the last thing we need to do is create artificial change. Oh my God, the sky is falling. We have too many combustion cars on the road. We need to replace them with lithium batteries and electricity generating stations and charging stations that... Oh my God, this species is so fucking stupid. Pisces is fish, but Aquarius is aquarium. And what's in an aquarium? Water. This is an elemental species that is still involved in this. Water is it's also one of the ones that's most easy to take life, because water can drown you if you're an air breather, or water can, the absence of water can kill you if you're a water breather. The maybe somewhat like Libra, not necessarily a good or bad role, but one that is, can work either way. Isn't all the elemental species are like that? So useful properties, depending on what you're trying to do. Chemists know that. Scientists know that. That's why, some elements are very interesting to science, and others are like, okay, well, noble gases, you can't do much with them, but they're kind of useful from a study standpoint. They make good neon light. Part of this whole transition. There's elements in all of this, but this is where elements become more important. Almost done. And the age of Aquarius okay, you notice it's not supposed to start till 2150. It's an age where either really bad things or really good things could happen, depending on the elemental powers still active in this game. Elemental powers are not just water, but also fire. You see more big floods, more solar events that could be catastrophic. All sorts of things could happen in this age of Aquarius. The people that are telling you, oh, it's going to be perfect, everybody's going to be happy, and yeah, blah, blah, blah. That's not how it's going to come out. That when this was all set up, nobody knows when the real Messiah is going to wake up completely. Okay? It's not like Goldilocks where you know how the story is going to end because you've heard it so many times. God's got to wake up from reincarnation, midpoint, and look around and say, is this close enough? Does this match the boundary conditions that I set up for this day of creation? This is where people get confused about God's not almighty, but he's a great planner and a great experimenter. He's done it all before. Perfect it, debug it, till it looks like what you were trying to create, and then you let it out of the lab to the next layer of distribution. Let's go from there back to one of the, I think we're getting pretty close. That's of creating a more perfect God and more perfect versions of all the other key souls of the key patterns of creation. And I told you there's really 5 souls that matter the most. They're the ones that form the Lilith. 5 is the necessary minimum to start a creative experiment. But if you want to find out, you can go through my other content that focuses on that. For that is what the completion of the Gaia experiment looks like. When you found a fully awakened Messiah amongst a whole bunch of Messiah candidates and a whole bunch of Messianic bloodlines, a whole bunch of different chosen people of a whole bunch of different chosen races, a group of planets within a particular star system, the chosen star system, in a particular cluster, the Sirius cluster, in a particular galaxy, the Milky Way, in a particular universe, the prime universe, which is not God's universe, it is is the God of this universe. This universe, the physical universe, is a place of testing. It's not supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be hard and help you define within yourself what your own perfection is. To get to know yourself, to get to know other souls. Of similar interest. That's why we need both. Oops. Let's put this back down. I'm sorry. Go back to the browser. That's why we need all these 5 primary souls. Lucifer's universe is the prime physical universe where the most difficult tests happen. There's a snapshot of every state of the physical universe that you can use to start your incarnations in when you're testing yourself. And this is what incarnation normally looks like. in the prime universe. You go about your business running your program as kind of a Pinocchio soul till you encounter something that challenges you, an experience where you have to make a choice. And your choices are what gradually, after one incarnation, you've made a lot of choices as a human being, especially, and you've made good choices and bad choices. And you're not really sure what was better or worse. If you're a newborn soul, certainly. So then that you go through an afterlife. The afterlife is where karma and Lilith come in. Lilith is the grandmother of all spiritual R&R to evaluate what we did, and karma helps with the evaluation. Karma is in charge of your life review. What you did right, what you did wrong. That's the first thing that people generally describe happens in a death experience. Near death or real death, and often will be a near-death experience. In fact, it may even be a real death experience. You can die in a psychedelic trip and not know it. You can die physically and be replaced by an NPC. And many of the people that go have exactly what I need to do. It's because not because they've become enlightened, but because they've been replaced by an NPC. It's programmed to look, act, and behave like they did before, but just what's acceptable in this universe. You're not being tested anymore, or a new version of you is being tested from in a way they have, because they're not the same person anymore. That soul is on to another universe to plan their next incarnation. And the replacement that thinks it's that person is the one that continues being tested. And that's essentially what's going on right now at the very end of the experiment. System. The testing is essentially done. There are a few more souls that, you know what, they're on a Messiah mission. We don't know if that mission is going to be successful or not. If they're going to turn to the dark side, if you will, or if they're going to stay pure. Except for a handful of souls that karma hasn't made up her mind about, essentially, who haven't really declared for certain sure which heaven or hell they want to head for, and there's a ton of them. So, you know, you basically, we're waiting for the fence sitters right now. This ties back to a play that you might want to get author of that. I'm sure I should remember that. Let's look that up. Samuel Beckett. Read that play, and it's such a spiritual play that most people have or the spiritual side of Monty Python's humor, which is actually very, very deep in a satirical way. We might want to do one just about this play, but I'll just stop there and mention that the name of that play is very significant, because if you understand the origin of and its connection with God ought, the idea of Samuel Beckett, you will have a large piece of the puzzle about what's going on now. Why did Asimov call his mechanical creation being slang for zero? 1906. Where did that come from? Of using ought as meaning zero. I'm not sure if that's even in the, let's just look up the etymology of that for a ought. Oh, origin French. Let's see some more of that. Forming nouns that were originally diminutives. Ballot, Cypriot, harlot. Nouns denoting a person of a particular type. Interesting. They don't even say off topic. Ought is zero. 1906. At least it used to be. Over there, I didn't know that one. What does it mean in business? Operational technology. I don't know. You could go down this rabbit hole for a while. I'm not going to do that today, though. But let me say that it's interesting that there's no mention of ought being associated with the concept of zero, because that's what's going on. That's why Asimov was inspired to display the name Waiting for God ought. At any rate, I hope you found that interesting, enlightening, weird and strange. Maybe you'll do some research yourself, or you'll feel some synchronicity with something I said. That's kind of how things work. Until next time, like, share, subscribe, and tune in again for the Omnist Hour. Happy Karma!